Today, we're going to talk about a life that tells a really profound story about what it means to serve. We're looking at the life of Alfred Lee Askins, a guy whose journey took him from the violent skies of war all the way to the quiet rooms of people at the end of their lives. And in that journey, we see something incredible about courage and compassion.
So, Lee's funeral was on November 12th, and what's really striking about that is that it was the day right after Veterans Day. There's almost a kind of poetry to that timing, you know? It's like the entire nation's sense of gratitude was pointed right at a man who lived and breathed what it means to serve.
And that really brings us to the big question here. I mean, how do you even begin to measure a life like that? A life spent in service, from the battlefield to the bedside. Lee's life wasn't just about one kind of service, but so many. It really makes you stop and ask, what does it truly mean to serve? So let's break it down.
We're going to start where his service took its most dangerous, its most intense form, in the skies over Vietnam. Lee was a U.S. Army helicopter pilot, which was, hands down, one of the most hazardous jobs in that entire war.
Okay, so check this out. The missions he flew were just worlds apart. On one side, you had what they called slick missions. That's flying troops into these incredibly hot landing zones, right into the thick of it. But then you had the hunter-killer missions, and that was a whole different ballgame. That's where they'd fly super low over the jungle, on purpose, trying to get the enemy to shoot at them, basically acting as bait.
And just try to wrap your head around the danger here. We're talking constant, intense gunfire from the ground. These were vulnerable single-engine choppers. I mean, imagine flying just 10 or 15 feet above the treetops, knowing you're the #1 target, or having to land in some makeshift clearing that you basically had to create with your own rotor blades, all while people are shooting at you. The level of courage that takes it's just off the charts.
Yeah, this quote says it all, doesn't it? The pilots flying the OH-6KUs, they called it the Loach. Their job was, fundamentally, to be a human decoy. That was the mission. Make yourself a target, draw the enemy out, so the heavily armed Cobra gunships flying with you could see where they were and take them out. You had to have nerves of absolute steel.
And Lee did this for two full tours in Vietnam. And get this, his first tour was in the infantry, on the ground in the jungle. His second was as a pilot, up in the air. To see the war from both of those perspectives, from the mud and from the sky, is incredibly rare. It just speaks volumes about his level of commitment.
But after all the noise and the chaos of war, Lee's service transformed into something completely different. It was a kind of service that didn't need a warrior's nerve, but, a quiet, compassionate kind of strength. So, back home, Lee started volunteering for hospice, visiting people who were shut-ins. This became his second theater of service. He traded the cockpit for a living room and combat for simple companionship.
And it's really important to understand what this role is. It's not medical at all. The whole mission of a hospice visitor is just to be there, to offer a human connection, to fight that deep, profound loneliness that so many people face at the end of their lives. And that commitment breaks down into these simple but powerful actions. It's about just being there, to listen, to offer support and just let people feel what they're feeling, with no judgment. Sometimes it's small, practical things, like reading their mail or making a cup of tea. This isn't about big, heroic gestures. It's about the steady, quiet discipline of just showing up for someone. That's its own kind of bravery, for sure.
And this is the connection that is just so amazing to me. The very same steady hand, the same focus it took to guide that helicopter through a storm of bullets, was the exact same hand that was now offering quiet comfort to someone. It's just an incredible testament to the depth of his character.
But you just can't tell the story of Lee Askins without talking about the absolute pillar of his life, his partnership with his wife, Toni.
This quote really just nails it. Think about it. Pilot, soldier, volunteer, father. Lee had a lot of titles, but partner was a title they shared, and really it was the one that defined both of them.
And you can see how their partnership worked across their whole lives. They were partners in service. They founded the Rolling Thunder chapter together, won awards for their work. They were partners in life, building a home, raising a family. And so crucially, they were partners in hardship. When Lee got sick, Toni became his nurse, his advocate, his unwavering anchor through it all.
So when we step back and look at this whole incredible story, how do we do it? How do we measure a life like Lee's? What are the themes that really stand out?
It really comes down to these three words. Courage. The courage to face down unimaginable danger. Compassion. the compassion to just sit with someone in their final moments, and partnership, the strength that comes from a lifelong bond that just made everything else possible. That was the measure of Lee Askins.
But a story like Lee's isn't really just about him. It's kind of a mirror, isn't it? It makes us think about our own lives, our own contributions, no matter how big or small. Because in the end, his life leaves us with this one fundamental question. In our own way, how will our service be remembered?